This program is rated PG. It contains themes and scenes which may not be suitable for very young audiences. Parental guidance is advised.
We're working to connect a region of over 600 cultural bridges between our lands.
Welcome to ASEAN in Focus. I'm Alma Angeles, and joining me today is from our EBC Vietnam Bureau. Hello, Eliana.
Hi, Alma, and good afternoon to all of our viewers. I'm Eliana Faith Sebastian from EBC Vietnam Bureau, giving you the news in the dynamic ASEAN region.
On today's headlines. U.S. President Joe Biden said the United States was taking action against Myanmar's military, including freezing access to U.S.-based assets, as he urged its generals to relinquish power.
Anti-coup protesters on Thursday took to the streets of Myanmar for a sixth consecutive day after U.S. President Joe Biden announced sanctions against the Southeast Asian interest generals.
And Thai pro-democracy protesters returned to the streets of Bangkok after nearly 2 months. Our EBC correspondent in Bangkok, Cristel Di Marucot, will give us an update.
France would bolster its engagement on defense and strategic partnership with the Philippines. French Ambassador Michelle Boucaud said she will lay down her priorities as the newly installed envoy in Manila.
First, on the update in Myanmar, President Joe Biden said the United States was taking action against Myanmar's military, including freezing access to U.S.-based assets, as he urged its generals to relinquish power. The president said his administration was cutting off the generals' access to $1 billion in funds in the U.S. and would soon unveil new sanctions. Let's listen in.
The U.S. government is taking steps to prevent the generals from improperly having access to the $1 billion in Burmese government funds held in the United States. And today, I've approved a new executive order, excuse me, a new executive order enabling us to immediately sanction the military leaders who directed the coup, their business interests, as well as close family members. We will identify at first round of targets this week, and we're also going to impose strong exports controls. We're freezing U.S. assets that benefit the Burmese government while maintaining our support for health care, civil society groups, and other areas that benefit the people of Burma directly. And finally, as protests grow, violence against those asserting their democratic rights is unacceptable, and we're going to keep calling it out. The people of Burma are making their voices heard, and the world is watching. We'll be ready to impose additional measures, and we'll continue to work with our international partners to urge other nations to join us in these efforts. As you know, the assault on Burma's transition to democracy remains an issue of deep bipartisan concern. We've consulted at length, for example, with Senator McConnell, who has had a very keen interest in this, and his team, and we welcome their helpful insights. We've also been in close contact with our allies and partners around the world, particularly in the Indo-Pacific region, driving vigorous diplomatic outreach to help coordinate an international response to what happened. The strong and unified message emerging from the United States has been essential, in our view, to encouraging other countries to join us in pressing for immediate return to democracy. Last week, the United States helped bring together the UN Security Council, which issued a strong statement in support of Burmese democracy. And this week, we will use our renewed engagement on the Human Rights Council to strengthen the world's commitment to human rights in Burma.
Now, U.S. law forbids assistance to governments that take power in coups. although virtually all U.S. funding to Myanmar is channeled through non-governmental groups. Top generals, including the army chief who led the coup, Min Aung Hlaing, are already under U.S. travel and financial sanctions for Myanmar's brutal campaign against the mostly Muslim people, Rohingya people.
Meanwhile, U.S. State Department spokesman Ned Price said that the United States could still raise further pressure on the generals by coordinating its actions with its allies. Let's listen in.
We can impose costs that are even more, that are even steeper, as I said before, by working with our like-minded partners and allies. So we haven't yet detailed the specifics behind that, but as we do so over the course of this week, it will be very clear to those around the world, but especially to the military elements in Burma who are responsible for this, that the costs for their anti-democratic action will be steep.
The popular show of force in Yangon, which came in defiance for protest ban in Myanmar's former capital, saw crowds swarm through the city and call for the release of Aung San Suu Kyi following her ouster in a coup last week. President Biden said his administration was cutting off Myanmar's generals' access to $1 billion in funds in the U.S. and would soon unveil new sanctions. Anti-coup protesters on Thursday took to the streets of Myanmar for a sixth consecutive day after U.S. President Joe Biden announced sanctions against the Southeast Asian nations' generals and demanded they relinquish power. There has been an outpouring of anger and defiance since the military ousted civilian leader Aung San Suu Kyi last week and detained her along with other senior figures of her National League for Democracy party. Security forces have used tear gas, water cannon, and rubber bullets against the protesters, with isolated reports of live rounds also being fired. Police also ramped up their harassment of the NLD with a raid on its headquarters. But demonstrators again marched peacefully on Thursday in Naypyidaw, the capital and military stronghold, as well as Yangon, the largest city and commercial hub.
In another development, Myanmar's military raided the Yangon headquarters of ousted leader Aung San Suu Kyi's party late on Tuesday, according to officials, as the U.S. joined the UN in strongly condemning violence against protesters demanding a return to democracy. The raid came after demonstrations erupted for a fourth straight day last Tuesday, with police using water cannon in several cities, firing rubber bullets at protesters in the capital Naypyidaw and deploying tear gas in Mandalay. Earlier this week, the protests by hundreds of thousands appeared to have rattled the military, with Junta Chief General Min Aung Hlaing making a televised speech to justify seizing power, citing election fraud claims. He also promised things would be different from the army's previous 49-year reign, which ended in 2011. The military also announced a curfew and a ban on protest gatherings. But on Tuesday, fresh demonstrations again erupted in Yangon, including near the NLD's headquarters, with protesters carrying placards calling for Suu Kyi's freedom and declaring no to dictatorship. Meanwhile, civil aviation workers and air traffic controllers have joined a civil disobedience movement, with their strike set to impact international flights wanting to pass through Myanmar's airspace. It will also hit the military government's coffers, which are set to lose overflight fees paid by airlines that could be worth up to $182,000 per day.
A 6.2 magnitude earthquake struck off the coast of Indonesia's Sumatra Island Wednesday, the U.S. Geological Survey said, but there was no tsunami warning or immediate report of damage. The strong offshore earthquake hit about 217 kilometers southwest of the city of Bengkulu at a shallow depth of 10 kilometers at 7:52 p.m. local time. shallow quakes tend to cause more damage than deep ones. The Southeast Asian archipelago experiences frequent seismic and volcanic activity due to its position on the Pacific Ring of Fire where tectonic plates collide. More than 100 people were killed when a 6.2 magnitude quake rocked the small city of Mamuju on Sulawesi Island last month. In 2018, a 7.5 magnitude quake and subsequent tsunami on Sulawesi Island left more than 4,300 people dead or missing. A devastating 9.1 magnitude quake struck off the coast of Sumatra in 2004, triggering a tsunami that killed 220,000 throughout the region, including around 170,000 in Indonesia, one of the deadliest natural disasters in recorded history. A devastating 9.1 magnitude quake struck off the coast of Sumatra in 2004, and this killed 220,000 throughout the region, one of the deadliest natural disasters in recorded history.
A Briton jailed for beating an Indonesian policeman to death in Bali with his Australian girlfriend has been freed after more than 4 years in prison, according to authorities. David Taylor is expected to be deported back to the United Kingdom after leaving Kerobokan prison on the Indonesian holiday island, according to an official who told this to AFP. Taylor and his former girlfriend, Sarah Connor, who was released from prison last year, were convicted in 2017 of fatally assaulting Officer Wayan Sudarsa, whose battered body was found in the popular tourist area of Kuta the previous year. Sudarsa's blood-soaked body was covered with dozens of wounds on his neck, chest, and head. Now, Taylor was given a 6-year prison term, while Connor got 5 years. Both received reductions in their original sentences, which is common for prisoners in Indonesia. Taylor, a former DJ whose stage name was DJ Nutso, had admitted getting into a fight with Sudarsa on the beach after accusing the officer of stealing Connor's handbag, hitting him with items including binoculars and a beer bottle. At the trial, Taylor claimed that he had feared for his life and acted in self-defense during the late-night brawl. Connor, a mother of two, maintained her innocence, insisting she only intervened to try to break up the fight. This claim was rejected by a Bali court, who said she held down the victim as Taylor beat him. The pair fled the scene, but Connor's driving license and ATM card were found next to the body. After police launched a massive manhunt for the couple, they took refuge in the Australian consulate in Bali, but later handed themselves over to local authorities. At the trial, prosecutors said the pair, who were tried separately, should not be convicted of murder because they did not intend to kill the officer. Staying in Indonesia, a crashed Indonesian passenger jet's throttles showed an anomaly and had been repaired several times before the deadly accident, but the exact cause of last month's fatal dive was still unclear, according to investigators on Wednesday. A potential malfunction in the Sriwijaya Air Boeing 737-500's engine control system was highlighted in this preliminary report on the January 9 crash, which killed all 62 passengers and crew, including nearly a dozen children. The 26-year-old plane, previously flown by U.S.-based Continental Airlines and United Airlines, plunged around 10,000 feet and crashed into waters off Jakarta just minutes after takeoff. On Wednesday, investigators said they were probing the auto throttle system as they published their interim report. National Transportation Safety Committee investigator Nurkayo Utomo said, quote, "The left engine throttle was moving backward too far while the right one was not moving at all and that it was stuck." He said they can't conclude anything just yet. Authorities have previously said the crew didn't declare an emergency or report technical problems with the aircraft before its dive and that it was probably intact when it hit the water. They cited a relatively small area where the wreckage was scattered and details from a retrieved flight data recorder, one of two so-called black boxes, showing the engine was still running just before it crashed. Communications with air traffic control were described as normal up until the moment that the plane sharply deviated from its intended course and then crashed. The crew, including an experienced captain, didn't reply to questions about the plane's change of direction. There are no indication that bad weather played a pivotal role in the accident. Authorities said two other commercial planes flew the same route without incident just before and after the plane crash.
Thai pro-democracy protesters returned to the streets of Bangkok Wednesday. After nearly 2 months, people rallied across Bangkok to call for the resignation of Premier Prayut Chan-o-cha and also reforms to the monarchy. Here's Cristel Dimarukot from EBC Bangkok, Thailand Bureau. Hello, Cristel.
Good afternoon, Eliana, and good afternoon to all our viewers as well. Here are the latest news here in Thailand. Hundreds of Thai protesters on Wednesday gathered at Pathumwan intersection to demand the immediate release of 4 leaders remanded in custody pending trial on charges of insulting Thailand's king. Protesters occupied the road and the skywalk in front of the MBK Center amongst tight security from crowd control police officers. They have brought pans and pots with them as their versions of weapons. The pro-democracy groups have pledged to intensify their protests. Panusaya Ram, Siti Jirawatanakul, one of the key protest leaders, announced that they plan to lead 2 million people to rally this year. Aside from releasing their leaders, the protesters call on 3 more demands, which they have mentioned in last year's protest: the resignation of Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha, charter change, and reform of the monarchy. Panupong Chadnok, a protest leader, said, and I quote, "Today is the first gathering, first opening, and a battle after unjust system jailed our friends." End of quote. According to Ms. Panusaya, 10 protesters, including 2 minors, were arrested and released on Wednesday. The 2 were released on bail of 5,000 baht each. The protest started around 4 p.m. At around 7:30 p.m., they marched to Pathumwan police station to demand their release. Explosion sounds were heard in Chula Soy 5 at about 8:20 p.m. behind the police station. Chaos arose, but nobody was hurt. A tear gas cartridge was found later. At about 9 p.m., the protesters dispersed. And that's the latest news here in Bangkok. Back to you, Eliana.
All right, thank you for your updates there in Bangkok, Cristel. Stay safe and stay healthy.
You too, Eliana. Stay safe and stay healthy. This is Cristel Dimarukot reporting live from Bangkok, Thailand, and we live in interesting times.
In the wake of last week's military coup in Myanmar, a young generation of protesters is cracking jokes at the army's expense. And they're winning fans on social media with these colorful and witty signs. On Wednesday, a group of young demonstrators held up signs while sitting in inflatable pools. Let's take a look.
Democracy! ဒါကတော့လူငယ်ရေးဆိုတော့လူငယ်ရဲ့အတွေးပေါ့နော်အတွေးနဲ့ပို့ပြီးတော့ဘယ်လိုစမ်းသစ်လို့ရမလဲဘယ်လိုမျိုးနိုင်ငံတကာစီကနေ attention ယူလို့ရမလဲဆိုတာစဉ်းစားရင်းနဲ့ပဲညီမတို့ပေါ်လာတာပေါ့နော်ဒါကဆက်ပြီးတော့လဲပေါ်လာနေအောင်ပါဟုတ်လောလောဆယ်ဒီလေသူရေကူးကန်ကတော့ညီမတို့ဒီចောင်းသားចောင်းသူတွေအားလုံးစုပြီးတော့ခါကြတော့ညီမ idea စပေးလိုက်တယ်အားလုံးကလည်းလှုပ်ချင်တယ်ရတယ်လှုပ်ကြမယ်ဆိုပြီးတော့အားလုံးဝိုင်းဝန်းလှုပ်ရင်းနဲ့ဖြစ်ပေါ်လာတာပါရှင်ဟုတ်
And the news continues here on ASEAN in Focus. Eliana and I will be back right after this short break.
Factual.
We have to defeat the virus everywhere.
Timely information. Balanced. Not only in the country, but also abroad.
I'm certain of one thing.
Interviews that people need to know. Watch Aguila Pilipinas. A 1-hour newscast of reports coming from regional hubs in Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. Know the important updates in Asia in ASEAN in Focus. Track the latest stories in the provinces in Aguila Provincia. Tune into Mata ng Aguila, the evening primetime news program of Net25. Balanced and objective, Mata ng Aguila covers national and international issues, tackles news on business, health, science and technology, entertainment, sports and human interest features, and current events. And Eagle News International delivers the latest global reports, impartial, accessible, and up-to-date. It brings to fore EBC's rich international scope and access to valuable information streams.
Well, thank you to explain our help outdoor track.
Catch these programs on Net25. You can also watch our news programs through eaglenews.ph and Eagle News Facebook page and YouTube channel.
Cambodian government officials, including sons of Premier Hun Sen, received their first shots of the Chinese coronavirus vaccines as the country begins rolling out its inoculation campaign against the coronavirus. The Southeast Asian kingdom received 600,000 doses of Sinopharm jabs from China on Friday after Hun Sen announced a donation of 1 million vaccines from Beijing last month. Let's take a look.
ហើយទី2អារម្មណ៍យើងវាមានការទុកចិត្តកាន់តែខ្លាំងតែឥឡូវយើងមាននៅក្នុងខ្លួនយើងមានប្រព័ន្ធការពារមួយដែលអាចជួយចូលរួមទប់ស្កាត់កូវីដ-19 អញ្ចឹងសូមជូនបងប្អូនទាំងអស់បាទសូមចុះឈ្មោះដើម្បីត្រៀមទទួលវ៉ាក់សាំងដើម្បីការពារកូវីដ-19 ព្រោះកូវីដ-19 គឺចេញពីខ្លួនយើងទាំងអស់គ្នាបាទបើយើងម្នាក់ៗការពារបានអញ្ចឹងគឺការការពារនៅក្នុងការរីករាលដាលបាទសូមអរគុណ បានទេអត់បានទេវ៉ាក់សាំងកូវីដ-19 គឺ Sinopharm នេះមិនអាចចាក់ជូនស្ត្រីដែលមានផ្ទៃពោះស្ត្រីដែលគាត់គ្រោងនឹងមានបុត្រនៅក្នុងរយៈពេល 3 ខែហើយក៏ដូចជាស្ត្រីដែលគាត់កំពុងតែបំរើកូននឹងទឹកដុកផងដែរអាចថាវ៉ាក់សាំងប្រភេទណា
Cambodia plans to vaccinate at least 10 million of its 16 million population with shots from both China Sinopharm and Sinovac, as well as the British-Swedish AstraZeneca. Sinopharm said in December that its vaccine had a 79.34% efficacy rate, lower than rival jabs developed in the West by Pfizer, BioNTech, and Moderna, with 95 and 94% rates respectively. Beijing has repeatedly insisted that the jab is safe and effective, despite not releasing any detailed clinical trial data. Cambodia has long been a staunch ally of Beijing's, receiving billions of dollars in soft loans and investments.
Philippine National Police Chief General Debold Sinas on Thursday ordered police to help health authorities in tracking down and arresting smugglers of illegal coronavirus disease or COVID-19 vaccines possibly being sold in the black market. Sinas said that in coordination with the Department of Health, the National Task Force Against COVID-19, and the Food and Drug Administration, police teams will monitor black market activities for counterfeit and unauthorized COVID-19 vaccines that may have entered the country. The country has not yet approved a coronavirus vaccine for general use. The FDA earlier warned the public against counterfeit vaccines, as authentic COVID-19 vaccines could be accessed only through the National Vaccination Program. While there are no reported fake COVID-19 vaccines in the country yet, the FDA is coordinating with the PMP, the Bureau of Customs, and the National Bureau of Investigation to prevent the entry of counterfeit vaccines.
The Australian Embassy in Manila expressed its readiness to assist the Philippine government in its COVID-19 inoculation program as the latter prepares to vaccinate those on its priority list, including medical frontliners. The commitment was made last week during a meeting among Australian Ambassador Stephen Robinson, Vaccine Czar Secretary Carlito Galvez Jr., Health Secretary Francisco Duque III, and Testing Czar Secretary Vince Dizon. The embassy said in a statement, quote, Ambassador assured the secretaries in the spirit of mateship and bayanihan that the embassy will do all we can to assist, unquote. Aside from this, the embassy also said that Australia had redirected its 2020 development assistance programs to reinforce the Philippine pandemic response. Its recent 21 million Australian dollar, approximately 780 million pesos, contribution to the ASEAN Center for Public Health Emergencies and Emerging Diseases is also expected to directly assist Manila combat the COVID-19 through capacity building efforts.
Deputy Prime Minister Vu Duc Dam urged Ho Chi Minh City to expand collection of test samples and diagnosis in high-risk areas to see whether the pandemic exists in communities. Dam, who is head of the National Steering Committee for COVID-19 Prevention and Control, stressed the point of the online working session between the National Committee and leaders of Ho Chi Minh City and Hai Duong Province on Wednesday afternoon. The city reported 33 locally transmitted cases from January 5 to 8, mainly linked to the Tan Son Nhat International Airport, according to Dr. Nguyen Tan Din, head of the Municipal Department of Health. Speaking at the meeting, Deputy Minister of Health Nguyen Trung Son said Ho Chi Minh City has been quick in collecting test samples, but diagnosis process remains slow. The National Steering Committee urged the city to further ramp up testing in high-risk areas such as coffee shops, near factories, and industrial parks to evaluate pandemic situation in the community.
In other news, Asian equities pulled back on Thursday after a strong run-up in recent weeks as investors took a breather while keeping abreast of progress in U.S. stimulus talks and the rollout of vaccines. Trading was thinned by holidays in major markets, notably Chinese New Year, which will see most of the region closed for several days. Global risk assets have been on a tear since November following Joe Biden's election win and the authorization of drugs to fight the virus, while optimism has been given an extra boost in recent weeks as data point to falling infections, deaths and hospitalizations. Traders also have an eye on Washington, where Biden's $1.9 trillion stimulus proposal is being discussed by lawmakers. Wall Street provided a soft lead with the Dow slightly up at a new all-time high, but the S&P 500 and Nasdaq were in the red, though they also are hovering around records. Hong Kong fell, having climbed more than 6% in just under 2 weeks, while Sydney, Singapore, Manila, and Wellington were also down. Tokyo, Shanghai, Seoul, and Taipei were all closed for the holidays.
The Court of Appeals has turned down a petition filed by broadcast network ABS-CBN Corporation in a labor case involving 2 of its employees. In a 15-page decision dated February 4, the Appellate Court's Special Ninth Division, through Associate Justice Rafael Antonio Santos, denied for lack of merit the petition for certiorari filed by the broadcasting firm. Associate Justice Elihu A. Ibanez and Raymond Lawigan concurred in the decision. The case involved employees Ellen N. Lagat and Simonette C. Soriano, who filed a complaint for illegal dismissal, non-payment of overtime pay, 13th month pay, incentive leave pay, holiday pay, as well as attorney's fees against the firm. On February 15, 2012, the labor arbiter rendered a decision finding that the broadcasting firm had indeed illegally dismissed the two and that Lagat and Soriano have become regular employees by operation of law. On February 27, 2013, the labor arbiter issued a writ of execution pending appeal for the payment of accrued salaries from March 26, 2012 to February 26, 2013, amounting to 245,150,000 pesos, inclusive of 10% attorney's fees, execution fee, and deposit fee. The firm then appealed the case, which eventually reached the Supreme Court, where it is now pending. In 2018, the labor arbiter issued an execution order for the payment, noting that there is no temporary restraining order issued by the CA or the ST, and therefore no legal impediment exists for the execution of the earlier decision. In turning down the firm's appeal, the CA also said the broadcasting firm failed to discharge its burden of proving that the National Labor Relations Commission committed grave abuse of discretion and denied the petition for lack of merit.
Staying in the Philippines, Speaker Lord Alan Velasco on Thursday said calls to revive broadcast giant ABS-CBN's franchise would have to wait until the next Congress. In a statement, Mr. Velasco said the House of Representatives would be set on finishing the remaining priority measures of the Duterte administration to help President Duterte fulfill his campaign promises before the 2022 elections. He also said on top of these priority legislations, we would like to see the passage of Bayanihan 3, as well as other economic bills geared toward rebuilding the Philippine economy shattered by the devastating impact of the pandemic and rebuilding the lives of Filipinos disrupted by the health crisis. In his televised talk to the people on Monday, President Duterte said he would not allow the National Telecommunications Commission to grant ABS-CBN permit to operate even if the broadcast giant gets a fresh franchise from Congress. The president said ABS-CBN should settle first their unpaid taxes. On January 5, Deputy Speaker Vilma Santos Recto filed House Bill 8298 seeking to renew for another 25 years ABS-CBN's legislative franchise.
ASEAN Focus will be back.
Innovation, digital disruption, globalization. Startups, micro, small, and medium enterprises, as well as large corporations, all face interesting challenges in the market today. Peek into the world of exciting opportunities and partnerships to drive growth with the latest business news and information. We are open for business. Your weekly dose of entrepreneurial inspiration to update you on the latest developments in the world of business. Get up close and personal with CEOs and thought leaders to help you discover valuable insights. Sharpen your instincts for smart decision-making with the latest markets and economic trends, disruptive ideas, global innovation, social entrepreneurship, and other leading-edge business ideas. Join the conversations to create a more vibrant environment for entrepreneurship. Catch Open for Business, from vision to action.
Ito na ang pagkakataon mong ipamalas ang natatangi mong galing sa pagkanta at pagsayaw. Kaya if you have what it takes to become the Tag-Isa ng Galing Part 2 Grand Winner, ipadala na ang inyong audition videos. Kung ikaw ay 18 to 65 years old, may angking galing sa pagsayaw at pagkanta. Ipadala na ang inyong audition videos sa tagisananggaling@gmail.com or contact Nikki sa 0977-651-9504 para sa singing category. Shing sa 0995-880-8004 at Nilibel sa 0995-330-4653 para naman sa dancing category. Narito naman ang guidelines sa paggawa ng inyong audition videos. You can also follow and like our Facebook page at Tagisan ng Galing and Net25 for more information. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel at Tagisan ng Galing and Net25. Kaya ano pang hinihintay nyo? Sali na! Ipakita ang inyong galing, manalo ng 2 million pesos at maging bahagi ng pinakamalaki at pinakamalawak na talent competition on Philippine TV and online. Tagisan ng Galing Part 2!
Welcome back to ASEAN in Focus. President Rodrigo Duterte on Wednesday expressed readiness to work with the European Union for the greater good of the people as he accepted the credentials of newly installed EU Ambassador to the Philippines, Luke Peron. In a speech in Malacanang Palace, Duterte emphasized the need to continue to reinforce Philippine-EU ties in face of new challenges and opportunities. Let's watch this.
The Philippines and the EU share a deep respect for democracy and the rule of law. This will serve as a solid foundation for robust cooperation on the basis of mutual trust, respect, and benefit. Ours is a long-standing relationship dating back to 1964. We should continue to redefine, refine, and reinforce our ties in face of new challenges and opportunities. I am encouraged by the convening of the subcommittees under the Partnership and Cooperation Agreement this year. This signifies our shared resolve to implement this landmark agreement, notwithstanding the pandemic. Our priority is to intensify trade and investment through a free trade agreement. We wish to partner with the EU to protect and promote all rights of all, especially the human rights of migrant workers. We are also ready to further enhance cooperation on climate change and the humanitarian assistance and disaster relief. Those most responsible for climate change must be held to account.
The Philippines and the European Union have enjoyed diplomatic relations over 6 decades. Our shared interests and values are a strong basis for a partnership based on respect and mutual benefit. The EU is eager to pursue the effective implementation of its partnership and cooperation agreement with the Philippines in all areas. By developing closer political relations, we together will strengthen multilateralism and cooperation on bilateral, regional, and global issues. And we will be true to our shared pledge to a rules-based international order. The EU has a strategic interest in a stable, prosperous, and secure Philippines. The EU is working with the Philippines to expand trade and investment, to promote maritime security, and to maintain open and safe shipping routes.
Meanwhile, President Duterte also accepted the credentials of 4 other envoys. Brazilian Ambassador to the Philippines, Antonio Jose Maria de Souza e Silva. Describing Brazil as an old friend and partner of the Philippines, the president said the two countries should work together to intensify trade and investment exchanges, especially in agriculture, biofuels, business processing, outsourcing, and logistics, as well as to ensure universal access to the vaccine. Ambassador de Souza E. Silva, in turn, said Brazil looks forward to further enhancing ties with the Philippines. Take a look.
Congratulate all. To my president, because my coming to the Philippines was a personal wish I had. And I was lucky and happy that this wish was granted. So there are those two reasons why I would like to extend to you also. We go from agriculture to new sources of energy. We go from science and technology to trade and investment, and from tourism to mutual political dialogue. Furthermore, Philippines and Brazil, due to the place they hold within their respective regional groups, Mercosur and ASEAN, this can also mean an opportunity to also bring closer together South America to Southeast Asia. I want to congratulate all of you and hope, as we all do, that this period ends soon and life will go back and the Philippines will again follow its path of development.
Let us work together to intensify bilateral trade and investment exchanges during your tenure, especially in agriculture, biofuels, business process, and outsourcing and logistics. I welcome the delivery of the 6 new A-29 Super Tucano aircrafts from Brazil last year. The partnership in defense and security is important for the Philippines.
President Duterte also hailed South Korea as a valued friend and partner of the country while accepting the credentials of Ambassador Kim In-chul. Ambassador Kim In-chul assured that the Korean government is committed to supporting the Duterte administration and its endeavors towards the country's development. Let's listen in.
Korea is the Philippines' 5th trading partner and 4th investor and ODA fund source. Koreans account for 1/4 of the visitors from around the world to this beautiful country, and 500,000 Filipinos visit Korea every year. Also, from last decade's Puerto Princesa airport renovation to the currently ongoing 3.7-kilometer Bangil Bay Bridge construction in Mindanao, we have been and are trying our best to work along with and for the Philippines.
Let us sustain the momentum of a robust cooperation in trade and investment, sustainable development, infrastructure, and irrigation and defense. We value your country's exceptional commitment to the Philippines Build program.
President Duterte, for his part, said Manila sees Korea as a valued friend and partner, citing the growth of its bilateral ties for the past 7 decades. The president said he intends to sustain this momentum, particularly on trade and investment, sustainable development, infrastructure, and defense. He added that the delivery of the BRP Antonio Luna demonstrates the two nations' mutual commitment to peace and security in our region. He also thanked Korea for its support in the country's pandemic response through donations of testing kits, personal protective equipment, and rice.
Now, France would bolster its engagement on defense and strategic partnership with the Philippines. According to French Ambassador Michelle Bocas said as she laid down her priorities as the newly installed envoy in Manila. The statement was made when she presented her credentials to the president on February 10 in Malacanang. The ambassador said as a nation of the Indo-Pacific, it commits to contribute to the stability, free trade, and peaceful settlement of the dispute, development, fight against climate change, and freedom of navigation in the region. Again, let's listen in.
Areas.
As a nation of the Indo-Pacific, France developed further its partnerships in this fast-growing region and commits itself to bring its contribution to stability, free trade, peaceful settlement of disputes, development, fight against climate change, and freedom of navigation in the region. In that regard, France is committed to continue to step up the growing cooperation in defense and strategic matters between the Philippines and France. France is also grateful for having been designated as a development partner of ASEAN, and we will honor this decision as a reliable and constructive partner on the long term with the organization and its member states, in particular the Philippines. Finally, investments in key sectors of the economy in the Philippines is for us a priority. We see with pleasure that more and more French companies are investing in major projects and benefit from a good image and excellent cooperation with local companies. Be assured, Mr. President, that France wishes to further its economic and commercial cooperation with the Philippines.
As you begin your tour of duty in the Philippines, I assure you of my government's keen interest to further strengthen cooperation with France in areas of mutual interest. I welcome France's active participation in our defense modernization and build programs. Yet, our constructive engagement must continue to grow. The challenges we face today are unprecedented. We need closer collaboration bilaterally and multilaterally in areas. We are interested in further expanding ties, particularly in defense, trade and investment, public health and tourism.
The Colombian government is interested to supply the Philippines with pork and beef products and has sought assistance from President Rodrigo Duterte to facilitate the admissibility process. Colombian ambassador to the Philippines, Marcela Ordonez Fernandez, made the request on February 10 after she presented her credentials to the chief executive. It also comes amid the surging meat prices in Philippine markets.
But this is we are interested in selling pork meat and beef to the Philippines, and we would welcome, Mr. President, any support you can give us to accelerate the admissibility process. We also want to see an increase in foreign investment both ways, as both your economy and my economy have a lot of potential. And we want more tourism. More and more Colombians are visiting the Philippines, and we believe that Colombia has everything that the Filipinos love. We have the culture, we have the music, we have the dance, and this brings me to all the exchanges that we hope to have between our countries. The orange economy or creative industries is a very important one, and both our countries strive in this. Allow me just to suggest our program in reintegration for former combatants, that now is a four-stage program, and it goes from institutional strengthening, the route to reintegration, community approach, and monitoring and evaluation. Our two countries have already exchanged talks and best practices on this, but this is something where we believe we could work a lot more. And another one is the centers that we have created for the youth to go after school and do sports and engage in culture and also in technology instead of getting into trouble in the streets. And allow me to say that we are very interested in learning from the Philippines. My president, President Duque, is very interested in all the breakthroughs that the Philippines has had in education. So we want the best practices of the Philippines in education. We are restarting our offer of Spanish classes for the diplomats of the DFA. And these are just some of the areas where we could center our work, but let me just mention other possible areas. One is, of course, security. We believe security is a public good, and we are ready to work on it as we are in the fight against terrorism. And we have just started the Colombian presidency of the Pacific Alliance, and through it we hope to strengthen the ties with Asian countries. Allow me simply to end, Mr. President, by insisting that we look forward to the opening of the Embassy of the Philippines in Colombia, because we want to have the Philippines permanently in our capital.
With your designation as a resident ambassador, and as we mark the 75th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relations this year, it is time to bring our ties to another level. Let us deepen bilateral and regional engagement with Colombia's recent accession to the Treaty of Amity and Cooperation in Southeast Asia. We are ready to further enhance cooperation, particularly in trade and investment.
And finally, in our news, cool or cringe? The U.S. ambassador to Vietnam has produced an unusual Lunar New Year message to the country in the form of rap. Career diplomat Daniel Crittenbrink rhymed his well wishes to mark Tet, the most important annual holiday for Vietnamese. Let's take a look.
Hey, Dad! How are you?
Time for introductions are at hand. Hi, my name is Dan. I'm from Nebraska. I'm not a big city boy. Then 3 years ago I moved to Hanoi. Check the calendar, Tet is coming soon. Kanta and Da Nang are in the mood. Suan, oi, suan dave. Clean the house now, friends are on the way. Cash for the kids, blessings for the family, love for my parents and everyone around me. Now my been on from mine to yours, from my shores to your shores, our friendship endures. US and Vietnam, from now to forever, we're trusted partners, prospering together. Chúc mừng năm mới from your boy in Hanoi. Chúc mừng năm mới, spread the joy. Chúc mừng năm mới, khắp mọi nơi. Tet, Tet, Tet đến rồi.
Okay, thank you very much, Eliana, for joining me today here on ASEAN in Focus.
Thanks, Alma, and that's the latest news in the ASEAN region. I'm Eliana Faith Sebastian from EBC Vietnam Bureau, and we live in interesting times.
We'll see you back tomorrow here on ASEAN in Focus. Thank you for joining us. I'm Alma Angeles, and we live in interesting times.
Samahan Samahan sina Wedge Kujamat,
itong balitang panggising sa ulo ng mga balita.
Apple David,
Sa 60 na pong katao ang isinugod sa ospital.
Phoebe Publico,
Economic sabotage ang mga tiwaling negosyante.
at Cristel Fesalbon
Pag-presyo ng gulay, makakausap natin
para iatid sa inyo ang mga kaganapan at pangyayari sa bansa at sa iba't ibang panig ng mundo. Mga napapanahong isyu ng bayan. May balitang sports, entertainment at iba pang kaalaman. Simula Lunes hanggang Biyernes, alas 5 ng umaga sa paborito nyong morning show, Pambansang Almusal, dito sa Net 25.
Pambansang Almusal.
It's really PM is the key dahil tuwing 8 PM, Monday to Friday, iaain na ang kantahan at kainang rolled into one. Abangan sina JC Parker at Marcelito Pomoy because it's time to sing, it's time to eat sa It's Sing Time! Dito lang yan sa Net 25.